I'm Jeff Eaton. I'm a senior architect at Lullabot. We're a company that builds large-scale websites, primarily with Drupal, and we also do a lot of training and consulting with other teams inside of companies that are trying to do that stuff. And the topic that I was talking about here at Open Source Bridge is easy beats open, which is somewhat provocative, I think, in open source circles, but the basic idea is something that we've encountered a lot in both our training with a wide mix of people who are trying to use Drupal and trying to build sites for our clients that are going to have a large pool of non-developers using the actual tools that they need us to build for them, and they need to be useful. They need to be usable. And at the end of the day, the editorial team for a website doesn't care whether it was built with open source tools or not if they can't actually use it effectively. The knowledge that this incredibly painful to use CMS interface that they have to get used to, but it was built with open tools. Okay, they still have a job to do. They still have things they need to accomplish, and that's something that's really, for the vast majority of people who are using software, they're not developers. And whether or not they can accomplish the things they care about is really their primary goal. I think probably one of the biggest challenges is also what has traditionally been our biggest strength. The idea that open source is very driven by developers who care about expanding and enhancing software or building it from scratch to do something that they need done. There's very much a focus on the kinds of pain points and the kinds of barriers to accomplishing goals that we as developers face, because we're building tools for ourselves, and I think that's a really, really valuable dynamic. But as open source has expanded and really grown, and the reach of it has begun bringing in more and more non-developers, we've also had to learn to, I guess, use more empathy in how we think about constructing the software, recognizing the kinds of barriers that other people are facing in accomplishing their tasks, not just people like us. I think there's a quote that I've always liked that the law in its majestic equality forbids both rich men and poor men from sleeping under bridges and begging for bread. And I think a lot of times it's very easy for us to say that free software is in its majestic equality allows anyone, programmers and non-programmers alike, to implement their own custom plugin loading system. It's a lot of the things that we value about open source are only useful to someone who is working with code. And figuring out how to leverage the strengths of open source and combine it with a sensitivity and an awareness of the barriers that other people face, I think is really what, there are projects and there are people who are really doing that well, but I think it needs to be a real part of open source's DNA as we think about expanding into a broader world. To some extent, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of work that I know is being done on the interface for actually editing content. What the screen that people use to enter, edit, and and create new posts. Because as it turns out, with a content management system, that's one of the hot spots that gets tons of attention. And I know there's a lot of really great people in the UX team working on it. I know. Even Jared Ponchat, one of the lead designer at Lullabot, has been working on that project as well. And I know there's a lot of stuff going on there. I think inside of a project like Drupal, because there's so much stuff going on and so much feature development and so much architecture work, it's very easy for those things to sort of get lost in the shuffle of a new release, unless there's something really big and splashy like the D7 UX campaign that was done for Drupal 7. It was a really solid push to improve the user experience for the administrative section. But making that an ongoing, integral part of the Drupal community and the development process is something that a lot of work has gone into, and I think it's really starting to bear fruit, even if there isn't a splashy campaign for it the way there was in Drupal 7. Well, it's a kind of it's a little bit of a Molotov cocktail of a title. Easy beats open, but at the same time, what open source brings to the table in terms of ease of customization and the fact that the ability to innovate is much closer to the people who are actually using software. Even if only a small percentage are developers, in any pool, that ability is there. The capability of innovating and doing things without simply waiting for a team somewhere off in the distance to decide what features should go into version 7 or something like that. That's huge. And that's a real central part of, I think, how software can keep moving forward. And I find that really exciting about open source. So I think it's not so much that I think open source is bad and easy to use closed source software is going to succeed. It's that I want to see open source continue to grow and expand into areas that previously it hasn't gotten a lot of attention in because non-developers or non-technical people weren't necessarily, open source hadn't really assaulted the barriers between them and their tasks. So I want to see that, but I still think open source is really incredibly positioned to do those kinds of things for people in ways that I think closed source software can't necessarily do in a profitable way, or it doesn't make sense for large companies to try to target certain kinds of user needs as effectively as open source can. I find that really exciting.